Okay, thank you. Actually, you kind of put me some extra pressure because apparently I'm the guy standing between you and your last meal today. Here. Right. Welcome to the session. My name is Kris van der Mast. I'm a Belgian MVP since 2007. I'm also an ASP insider, together with two of the other speakers around here, Mike and Maarten. I also organize Cloud Brew, and I'm also one of the board members of the Belgian Azure user group called ASUS. This session is going to be about Microsoft chatbots, or like Microsoft also likes to call them from time to time, conversations as a platform. For years, we have been using things like search engines, either this one or any alternative. But during the last years, we see a lot of people actually basically that they want something like this. Conversations. So where's my order number? Where is this? Where is that? Basically, a lot of youngsters we see nowadays, they want to go for this. Of course, something doesn't exist apparently nowadays if it doesn't appear on some funky chart by Gartner. And here we can see both natural language processing, it's already on the right side, and conversational user interfaces. Mind you, this was a chart from 2016. I don't have personal access to Gartner because it's quite costly, but luckily one of my business owners at the company that I work at has. And it's not anymore on this chart anymore, basically meaning that it's not a hype anymore. Companies, enterprises, people are actually implementing it. We already have one in production and soon several more to follow. But why all of a sudden all this like chatbot and conversational stuff, where does it come from? Well, perhaps a small piece of history by Mr. Nadella himself. We used to have like the PC era, then came the web era. I started using internet and Yahoo in like 1997 or so. I guess most of you also have a big history on that part. Then things like this came out, like smartphones. I think most people already have one and are looking to the next hype, like those virtual reality goggles. But at the moment, we see like a convergence going to messaging. Because why? Everyone uses WhatsApp or WeChat or GroupMe or name any one of all the other available. Some types of bots, and this really depends on who you have in front of yourself. Like a psychoanalyst, he might have like a whole slew of different types of chatbots, or bots in general. Someone from the business who is a domain expert perhaps might have another idea. Personally, I'm an engineer, so I do the technical part, and I usually see two types of implementations. Guiding bots that basically take the user by the hand and try to go meet their goal, and open bots. Basically here, you see someone like an end user. What's he going to do? Kick the ball, go at home, play some video games, take the car, go to the airport, talk to the other person? We don't know. Basically, it's open. Anything can happen. Of course, guiding bots are pretty easy to create, pretty easy to maintain, and also have like usually like a dedicated purpose, like where's my order? Or why is my flight delayed? Or when will my flight come in? Yeah, indeed. I wish I had a funny story side. Yesterday I had quite some troubles thanks to the storm above Amsterdam to get here. And I tried to get into contact with the help desk through Twitter support of KLM. They were very friendly, but I already arrived here before I got my answers. So I really wish there was like a Twitter chatbot where I could just ask like, please update me. Luckily, both my wife was watching on flight radar, and also I got some information on my smartphone, like, look, this is your flight, it's being delayed till like 12:10. Open bots, as I told you, are more difficult because basically you don't know when your user comes in, what's he going to ask? It needs quite a lot of time, effort, needs regular training. Perhaps like, for example, a big event happens, an earthquake, Trump becomes president. You have to make sure that your bot can answer to those questions like, who is Mr. Trump? And usually it has multiple purposes. The client I work at, we created an application and also a bot for youth. And funny thing was, when we started with that, I sat down with the business people and basically were thinking like, yeah, I want to ask something about insurances or how to open an account. I told them, please also put something into it like, I want to commit suicide. Sounds very harsh. Everyone laughed at me in the beginning. We went live. I think within 2 days, we already got like 3 times that question, I want to commit suicide. In the beginning, we didn't train for it. After that, because I was actually really looking at the monitoring, like what's being asked, now we have a decent answer for it. Well, after those 2 days already, we have a decent answer for it. We just redirect them to the website and to the telephone number, like, please call suicide line. Actually, it's still being asked several times per week. Did we intend that purpose? Totally not. But this is an open bot, so you can expect any kind of question. Be prepared for that. Guiding bots. I'm going to show you a small demo about a guiding bot. As I told you, very simple. And the thing is, actually I should have done this demo before lunch. What I created is a chatbot, and I hope, can everyone actually see it? And I expose it through Skype. So I can go to my Skype bot and ask, like, I want to order a sandwich. So here I can choose before, let's say, for example, a BLT. And I hope the web app behind it kicks in. I'm on the free tier, so might be a slight delay. I'm going for the 6-inch. And I know, say for example, if this is a very long list, I know something with 9, so I can type in 9. And here I got like a subset of what I had before, so I'm going for the 9-grain honey oat. I'm going for cheddar. And here I'm going for number 1, number 6. Tomatoes are very tasty and good for me, according to my wife. And let's also go for lettuce. So you see, you can both type it in or just pick a number. And here I can choose this. And here my sandwich should normally be submitted to the backend, and then someone can kick into gear and actually make my sandwich. But what if I actually want to change something? For example, that 6-inch, I'm a bit more hungry, so I want to go for a foot long. So here I can go back. And let's type that correctly. And here I can choose something else. So basically, this is like a templated form. Well, I guess most of us here in the room are developers. If you have to go and maintain that state, it's not always that easy to create it. Well, I know for sure it's going to take me a bit of time and really good thinking, like how should I implement this in a decent fashion. Luckily, Microsoft makes it a bit easy. They already have the spoon, you just have to swallow it. Okay. Wow, I got some interaction from the Finnish crowd, awesome. Basically what I created, because you don't want to see me type and make lots of typo mistakes, so I created several demos up front. And you can already see, well, let's go here and put present on. Everyone can see the code in the back of the room? Okay, super. Here you can already see that it's basically a web API-based template. Most of the people nowadays, I think, make use of web APIs, so it's already really easy to start with. The template also adds a couple of NuGet packages, basically like the Bot Builder SDK. and already puts it in front of you. So here what I created is just like I have a web API REST method with this route. And here I'm just going to create my subway dialog. So here you see all those choices that I showed you before. I chose the BLT, I chose the footlong, the 9-grain. These are just enumerations. So nothing too difficult, plain old C#. And this is the magic. The order in which I put my properties on my class basically are going to define all the steps in my template that you just saw. And here I can say, like, look, make me a form, and everything is already in there. So as you can see, pretty easy to set up. You can basically create something like this for your next door restaurant in a couple of hours if you want to. The great thing about it is, something that I didn't show you, I can also type in help, for example. And here I already get, and this is all already built into the bottom builder SDK. I can go back, I can quit, I can show the status. I can go back, just like you saw, because when I chose the length of one of my sandwiches. Or I can quit, and I can go back. So really, this is already filled in for you. You just have to create your enumerations and your choices and deploy it. I deployed it to a web app on Azure, and I put it out on the bot connector so that I could connect to it on Skype. Okay. So the typical X-ray of such a bot, like how did I accomplish this? Because putting something on Skype, well, I don't know how to program against Skype. But luckily, Microsoft also makes it very easy for us. What you just saw was a piece of code, basically a web API, with some extra NuGet packages. And this is where your code goes. You put it outside on the bot connector, which is a service running on Azure by Microsoft. And Microsoft makes it very easy. Basically, they chew all the input-output that those services need. At the moment, you have like Skype. Apparently, you also can do it through SMS. You can chat with the bot through SMS, through email, web chat, GroupMe, Skype for Business, or also a direct line. So if you're a mobile developer, either doing like iOS or Android or UWP or Xamarin, you can make use of the direct line, which is basically another REST call. You have to make up the correct JSON, but you can play with it. If you want to make it a bit smarter, because basically now we built a guiding bot, but we also want to go to like that open bot. Also, Microsoft got you covered over there, thanks to what they call their cognitive services. And this is a bunch of services that Microsoft puts into place, like face recognition, speech recognition, emotion detection, text detection, and on a regular basis there's new stuff coming out. And then, of course, also from your code, whenever you get like, hey, this is my ordered sandwich, let's put it in a database or put it on a queue that someone else can see it on the screen like, hey, I have to create this sandwich or something else. So these cognitive services, they put them in several, like in 5 different parts, like in vision, speech, language, knowledge, and search. You have the vision. I personally like the computer vision API. I will show a couple of demos about that as well. Or face API. Speech is also a very interesting one. Text analytics or translation. Like, for example, I don't know how to speak Finnish. Sorry about that. But I could use, whenever, just like another device. But I could also send it. It's basically like a REST call. Put in some Finnish sentence and get something back in a language that I understand. You also have the knowledge part. Q&A Maker is a very interesting one over here, also to quickly start a bot. Q&A Maker makes it very handy if you already have, like, for example, a frequently asked questions page on your website. To extract that, put it in Q&A Maker, and it can already start making a bot. Pretty handy feature to basically get started pretty rapidly. So instead of like going to the fact page and scroll down, because it might be like lots of pages, this makes it possible to basically have like a chatbot window, and you can start asking it questions based on your Q&A. And then, of course, also search. First of all, I want to show you, like, how did I put that bot on Skype? Because as I told you, I'm not a Skype developer. But luckily, Microsoft puts it into place. And this is the old way of doing things. And I hope, okay, here. So here you can see that I put it on Skype, Skype for Business on web chat. And I can also add very easily other channels. This is on dev.botframework.com, but soon it will be replaced. So I actually will have to migrate my bots. Yesterday I heard from one of the other speakers that they also already had a chatbot at their company, and they already did the migration. I didn't dare to because I was like going to present in front of you, and if something kind of blows up, I didn't want to take that risk. Besides, you can still make use of this. Know, however, that the preferred new way is to actually go to Azure portal, type in new, choose AI plus cognitive sources, and from there on make a web app bot. And then, of course, you get a new blade, you can type in the name. And this is already an interesting part. Microsoft already puts in like templates in front of you. This is just like a basic bot. It will just like repeat what you're talking and say like, hey, the length of the string that you typed in and asked me is so long. Well, this is the language understanding. This is more for like the open bot. This is the question and answer. Basically, it wants you to set up a Q&A Maker instance, and also the proactive bot. For those cognitive sources that I was talking about, here you have, like, for example, the computer vision. So if you would upload an image of this kind of building, it would give you back this. So it thinks it's outdoor and that it's a city. It's a building, it's a picture, it's something large. It could be a background. Apparently there's water and a river somewhere inside, so I guess that's over here. Or we could also say, for example, okay, super, do like face recognition. And this person is, according to the API, is 53 years old, and this young person is 6 years. Of course, these are provided Microsoft images, so I also want to test it on my own picture. And according to Microsoft, I'm a man, which is pretty good, I think, thank you. It's indoor, that's correct. I was at a friend at that time. I'm not really wearing a necktie, I just had a t-shirt on, so it's not completely correct over there. And it says like a man smiling for the camera with a confidence of, this is 98%, which is pretty much correct. I really tried my best to smile. And also at that moment, I was indeed like 38 going towards 39. So it's...
Pizza?
Sorry?
The last word, have you eaten pizza? It's pretty good. That's true.
Yep. The funny thing was, I also tried it with the same picture, but now in color. And all of a sudden, it thinks I'm 37. So really, if you add some color, life becomes more beautiful. No, it wasn't at my wedding. I had a bigger smile back then. Like a new service nowadays in this is also like whenever you upload a picture, it will also do some like recognition or like OCR. And not only from like typed things, but also like handwritten. I can't say it's already like 100% confident, but they're training, and it's really nice to see that they have this option as well. Remember, you can also just like make a WinForms application and just call the same REST API service, of course. For the text analytics, it will not only define like what it thinks, which kind of language it is. Of course, English is the best trained at the moment, but we'll also try to detect the sentiment. And basically here you see that sentiment, like 1%, so apparently the sentence, the person was quite angry or very negative. 50% is just like neutral, like no sentiment whatsoever, and 100% is extremely positive. I can try it, for example, with something in Dutch. Basically, no one understands now except the Dutch-speaking people. Basically, it says like, I had a lot of storm yesterday when I was flying into Helsinki. I can analyze that. And unfortunately, they put, since pretty recently, this over here. Let's hope I type in that correctly. So it understands that this is a Dutch sentence, which is already cool. It's 100% sure this is Dutch. And I didn't say something really bad or good, just like, yeah, fait divers, like, I just had a lot of storm, like no basic sentiment. So 51% like somewhat positive, because I apparently arrived in Helsinki, otherwise I could not type this message. I don't know Finnish, but I tried it also out, first with Google Translate, and then tried to type in something in Finnish, and it really recognized Finnish, so that's already good. Only on the, well, perhaps it might also be Google Translate who kind of messed up the sentiment, because I tried something with a negative sentiment and still gave me 65%. So.
You thought it was negative, but for us it was probably positive.
Oh yeah, could be. It was about the bad weather, but perhaps you're... Okay, super. Oh yeah, that's true, you're used to that. But really very nice services, and there's a bunch more. And on a regular basis, new versions come out. Okay. Lewis. Lewis is actually the language interpretation service by Microsoft, and some of their competitors also have some very interesting ones. And this is typically used to make like what they call open bots. I could talk like an entire workshop about this service alone. And it turns out to be for developers, it's good to have a bit of a knowledge about how the product works, but it's usually domain experts and business people who kind of make use of this and make up like sentences to train the bot whenever something happens. For our bot, we tried we saw the exams of the youth coming up, so we tried to make some new test questions so that they could get answers like, yeah, how can I study best? Where can I get some tips on improving on my studying habits? Where can I go and study, for example? Because a lot of public buildings nowadays in Belgium, they try to open up in the exam period their offices so that a lot of youngsters can go and come and sit together and study. Lewis, again, is a service. So I open that up here. It's at lewis.ai still at the moment. It went general available, I think, like end of November, beginning December. And nowadays it's like 500 intents. When we started in September 2016, it only had 20 intents, so we had to make like some really strange things with multiple applications because we had way more than 20 intents. To make sure like what an intent is, they try to give here a explanation. An intent, or how Lewis determines what a user wants to do. Basically, when you ask a question, you usually have like an intention to get a certain specific answer. Say, for example, you're a Star Wars fan. Who's a Star Wars fan, by the way? Ah, great. Say, for example, you want to know, like, what's the upcoming Star Wars movie? So you could ask, like, when is the next Star Wars movie coming out? You could go to a search engine, or you could also go, for example, on a website like IMDb or so, or have your own private fact fan website, and have a bot over there. You could type in, when is Star Wars next movie coming out? The intent here could be like, find upcoming movie by title. This is the intent. It's up to the domain experts and business people to actually start training this, so that actually the LUIS, the language interpretation service, knows kind of what you're asking, because I can ask like, when is the new movie coming up? When is the new Star Wars movie coming up? When is it coming out? All those like small differences. Also, emotional detection could also be in like, damn it, when is the next movie coming out? Or how long do I have to wait until movie X comes out? These are all kinds of, well, questions that should be trained so that you can get into the correct intent. Besides that, you also have entities, and entities act like a kind of like metadata. I would call them parameters or attributes of something that you intended to find. In this case, I tried to create something like a customer service facing bot. It was a kind of experiment. Actually, we are going live in a couple of months with such a service, with such a chatbot on the corporate website. So here I could go to my intents. And these are, which is called like utterances, basically training sentences. And here I can get to see the entities view, like here it recognizes like, hey, this is an order keyword or an order number. And these are my training sentences, like, what's the status of order, and then a specific number. As you can see, just providing a number doesn't really give a very good result, because it only detects like, yeah, I think it's an order status, but I'm only 32% sure. But I think it's the non-intent, which is basically the base intent, which is always in every new LUIS application. And I give that a score of 64%. Basically, this means that LUIS doesn't really understand what you mean, because the non-intent is like, I have totally no clue what you're asking me. So this will need some extra training. Nowadays, since recently, LUIS is very kind enough to actually show this in red, so that you know, like, hey, I have to pay attention to this one. The other ones are pretty well defined, like 99% sure, which is really good. 82%, I'm also still happy with that. Usually we try to cut off at like 60 or 75%. Our entity is over here. I can also make this, for example. And these are like basically the same utterances. Since recently, they also added fuzzy search, because what we did in the past, still up till now in our live bot, is first go to Bing spell check, because youngsters kind of have the tendency of not putting in perfectly nice made-up sentences. I guess it's the same in the Finnish language. So first we throw it through Bing spell check. We get like a pretty decent question back, and then we send that to the LUIS or one of the alternatives, and see which is scoring the best. Again, training, following up, it really takes a lot of time for the business people in the beginning. So all that mumbo jumbo, like, oh yeah, let's have a chatbot and then we can kick out 30% of our employees on the help desk, kind of not really true so far. Those 30% of those people are actually now training the bot. with all those simple questions like, I forgot my password, I can't log in anymore. Typically after 2 weeks of holiday, that's the most asked question. And I can imagine if you hear that question like 100 times per day, you really can get fed up with it. So we really want to make sure that we have now chatbots in place in a couple of months, that people can actually ask such a question. Like, for example, me next Monday, if I come back from this lovely conference and I forgot my password, I can ask it to the bot. And the people who are actually doing like the help desk, they're not going to be replaced. No, they're going to do like, hey, my computer broke down or something, or the CPU blew up, I don't know. The more interesting questions. But all the, well, fat-fingered questions or the typical questions, the repetitive questions, they can start to be handled by a bot. Really powerful stuff. For developers, you can make use of it, but usually it's done by domain experts. Now, in this specific case, I can go to another bot. And again, Microsoft makes it very easy for you to connect to it. So there are two keys that Lewis provides, like basically the application key and the Lewis key. You just provide that through an attribute, because we're C# developers, we love attributes. And here you see like those other attributes, Lewis intents. Actually, everyone can see this in the back of the room? Okay. An empty string basically means like the non-intent. As I told you, it's always there. If it doesn't have any clue whatsoever what you're asking, it will get into this intent. So basically this is your like catch-all, and you will have to see, or in this case, I give back a message like, sorry, I do not understand. Please rephrase or something. If it notices like, hey, he asked something about an order status, it will come back in here. And of course, I kind of cheated because I don't have a database backing up this one. So I will just say like, hey, this is your order status. For the other intent, it's like the customer service, like, hey, I cannot log on anymore. It will try to come in here and then try to figure out in a switch, like, is he asking something about a password, like a login, cancel, and then try to do some effort or try to go further. Of course, these are built with dialogues, as I called in the Bot Builder SDK. You can also chain them. You can make sub-dialogues. I didn't want to go that far because it's already a bit more deep level. But it can be done. So really, you can make some really fancy, freaking bots if you want to, with like lots of iterations and go in and go down and ask for the name, or go and have like a REST API call to DHL and actually show like, where's my package? When will it arrive? If I now run this, here you can directly see like, hey, this is a web API. Luckily, they also provided a bot test environment. It's just like a small installation. Takes a while to boot up. And here I can connect to, for example, my flow, which is basically my, again, the sandwich ordering bot, if it kind of kicks into gear. I hope. Hello. Ah, okay. So here you have again, but then in a different representation, the same thing. Okay. The cool thing is, also here on the right, you can see like which kind of JSON is being transferred back and forth. If you want to make that direct line approach, this might be a good source to take a look at, like, hey, how is the JSON being built up? Oh, sorry, I should not have closed that one. Let's here go to our Lewis bot and say like, when will my order arrive? Now, hopefully we get, so now basically our bot is sending this to Lewis. It got apparently interpreted like, hey, he wants to know some information about an order, so I got into that intent. And now I can provide a number and get back into the code and say like, hey, this is the status. Most likely it will have to go to an API or to a microservice or database like to look it up the number and give actual information. But this is how it works. As you can see, pretty easy to start with. And thanks to the bot connector, once you put it on Azure or on any other public endpoint, we all do it on Azure, of course, you can expose it through the bot connector and have it on Skype or SMS or whatever that you want to expose it on in a pretty easy fashion. Okay. So this was Lewis, and you saw that I put in already quite a lot of code, especially if you want to chain dialogues together, you might get like a big solution. And each time you also have to deploy it whenever something new come up. So Microsoft is now also facing the competition from other vendors who took a completely different approach. Personally, I also like that approach because it's very easy for the business people to create dialogues in a visual fashion. So Microsoft is also busy with that. I was not allowed to show you some things of the private preview because they don't want their competitors to see everything already. But I was allowed to take a picture from one of the latest, I think it was like in September, conferences by Microsoft, where they kind of showed this already. I think at Build, well, I'm not sure, so don't quote me on that. I don't have any time frame nor inside information. But usually my guess is that like at one of the big conferences by Microsoft, so I think Build is one of the first, most likely they will show a bit more about this. But don't quote me on that. I have really no time frame on it. But it's really cool to see that Microsoft is actually also going into that direction. The reason why, I don't have to draw this. Well, I could, but basically you would give this typically to a domain expert or a business person. So I can focus on the code and really do the integration with the backend services and get all the information that I need. And they can really design because they actually know how to create a new insurance or ask for a sandwich, for example. This is the resources that I want you to go to. At the moment, still at dov.botframework.com. Please know that in a couple of months it will be taken out, and everyone should go through the Azure portal. The Conversation Designer, this is the YouTube movie that you can watch. I will put it also on SlideShare or somewhere on my website, so that you can go and take a look at it. And with that, I'm basically at the end of my session. Please fill in the survey. I know you can, and some pretty cool stuff. If you want to get into contact with me, you can follow me on Twitter, KVDM. You can just send me an email, kris@azig.be, or check out my website where I will also try to blog in the coming weeks and months more about Bot Framework. Thank you all for your attention, and if you have questions, I will still be around here, or get into contact with me on either Twitter or email. Thank you.